When you are consciously reality shifting, I find it to be very helpful to move into this readiness stance. I used to play tennis, and while I was waiting for my opponent to hit the ball, I was trained to be up on the balls of the pads of my feet in a ready stance position in a split step. And ideally, you would be in this position so you could lift off in any direction as soon as the ball was hit. But it was drilled in us that we needed to prepare. And when we are looking at the shot that we hit last, when we are looking somewhere else, when we are in our heads about something, it takes away from our ability to shift directions, to get into that ready stance. And so I find that consciously reality shifting is the same sort of dance where if you want to be cognizant of the ride and you want to observe it and you want to guide it and direct it. I'm not talking about unconscious reality shifting or waking up to a Mandela effect or waking up in a new manifestation. But if you're actively a reality shifter, you need to have a ready stance. And part of that is taking your cognition, whatever it normally is for you, and adjusting it so it's almost sitting back a little bit and you have this observer function inside your brain that is observing your thought patterns, because that predominantly selects for certain realities and attaches you into a baseline reality, as the last episode discussed. And you want to be able to assess where you're at. And one of the mistakes that I believe is made is this idea that we know what is best for us. I mean, sometimes we actually do, but to default to that and say, I'm going to go to India 2022 and I'm going to pull all my money out of the bank. This was really a thought that I had in 2018 when I looked at the astrology of 2020, and then I started looking beyond and I was like, oh my God, I got to get out of here. I did, but India was not the best option for me. But at that time, if I had overly attached, and I still use a bank, if I had overly attached myself to that goal, then I would be in another lifeline by now. I might not have made this recording. And intuitively, I feel like I'm in a better position right now. The reality that has unfolded is very much to my liking. I wake up feeling excited, feeling centered, feeling purpose-driven in a way that I've never done before. I'm vibrating with authenticity. And so I'm really, really pleased with how things have unfolded for me. But back in the day when I was starting this, I used to be like, I've got a manifestation, I've got a goal, I'm going to go after it. And then I would go after it with this intensity and fervor and stubbornness that I was like, well, I haven't achieved the goal, so I'm not going to, and so I just say this to say that when you are very goal-oriented, when you are invigorated by climbing mountains, then what can happen is that you can overly attach to an outcome, which greatly disrupts not only the manifestation process, but the reality revealing process. Because what I have observed is that when you start reality shifting based on if you're in human form, and most of my listeners right now are, your cognition is wired a certain way to perceive the world a certain way. And as a result, you have a couple of handicaps. And so you have to work around these handicaps. And one of these handicaps that I haven't really talked about is over asserting what you think reality should be. Because reality shifting is this really delicate flower that blooms in front of your face that you're likely to ignore on a day-to-day basis, especially if you're unconscious. Until one day you wake up in a vastly different reality. You're like, how did I get here? And then you go on to comment sections on social media and argue about the Mandela effect. And you're like, what's going on? It's CERN. We're always going to blame CERN. I think it's much bigger than CERN. But we all love a good conspiracy theory. So these stories are entertaining, like these narratives that we use to make sense of the world is part of our cognition. I'm going to have a detailed episode about this later on, but we have to make things make sense. And so that means that there's always somebody to blame for why we are confused. And usually the default is that it's some evil organization that we are very distant from. So it's easy for us to villainize them because we're like, oh, it's the evil scientist in CERN. I knew it. There's always somebody evil somewhere. Oh, it's the Nazis. They've really taken over our government. And then you talk to somebody in the white supremacist groups and they're like, oh my God, it's the Jews. They've taken over. That, like everybody has their big capital they. And it's kind of interesting to observe this phenomenon of humanness. And so when things don't make sense, like when we start collectively colliding into other realities, then we just insert organization that's most probable, but that we don't really actually know a lot about. But that way our brain can latch on to there being somebody to blame. And then we can do the whole witch hunt thing because we're primitive animals, apparently, and we always need to string somebody up on a cross. We've been doing it for eons. Anyway, so let's move on. I get off on little tangents sometimes. So reality shifting is a very delicate flower that wants to bloom. And if you're in a normal American bred cultural society, and America's changing. So this recording is made in 2023. We'll have to see in 5 to 10 years what the culture's like, because it's all gonna change. But traditionally speaking, there is a certain mentality that is very specific to Western Europe and the United States, particularly the United States. And I just happen to have a lot of German friends, so I know Germany too. You can see it the way we drive and the way like we show up for appointments. And living in other parts of the world kind of helps you realize how uptight we really are. And so this is a barrier if you're trying to reality shift, because if you're like, where's my manifestation? It hasn't come in yet. It's 12 o'clock. Then you actually repel the reality from coming to you, because your auric field is that, it's a vibration. And if you're not in a receiving state of energy, if you're not in a passive state, if you're not letting it unfold, like if you are educated in energetics, I think about the passive masculine, where that type of energy just holds the space to allow people to come out. And it's a beautiful type of masculinity, which is often not honored or revered in society, but it's actually such a beautiful, beautiful sight to behold. Because when you are in the presence of a passive masculine energy, especially that's exalted, they will bring out the best in you, because they know how to listen, they know how to protect, they know how to facilitate without dominating. They actually can like reach inside of you and then pull out what you don't even see yourself. And so when you are developed by somebody with the strength and passive masculinity, and I've been developed by somebody like this, so I'm speaking from experience. And I mean, it was just an incredible gift because they just brought out these elements within me, and this was in a professional context, and helped me shine. And then they gave me the space to shine. Like there was no competition. It was like they saw these elements, they pulled them out, and then they created the space for me to spread my wings. Reality shifting is sort of like that. Is sort of like letting it come to you, dancing with it for a moment, pulling it out, right? But if you're in the domineering headspace, if you're in the gotta get it done, gotta where is my where, then you're not going to be in the space that is conducive for knowingly reality shifting. You can, in my opinion, still reality shift, but you're not going to be cognizant of it because you're going to overwrite it with this image and this construct of what you think reality should be. We're going to India. I'm pulling all my money out of the bank. And then I ended up actually in Latin America instead. And I'm glad that I released that, right? And so when you have those goals and you have those plans, and you have a active masculine energy, and it's not gender specific. We all actually have all the energies, but it's like what is dominantly, innately expressed in you. Are you cognizant of it? Are you aware of it? Are you conscious of it? Or can you select for it? Is really what you need to be able to do. And we can work on that in one-on-one coaching if you don't have experience with that. Most people have a template within them and have one of four. There's also active feminine and passive feminine, and they predominantly express one over the others. And what you want to do is you want to be able to shift and balance those and pull on those when you need to pull on them. And I'm at a point right now where I have to shift back into my active masculine energy to catalyze some of my manifestations. So now I'm very much more action oriented and rigid and getting things done and pushing things and driving things, right? But there was a process and a period of time that I was in my feminine energy and I had to work on that. And so you need to, at least at a minimum, be able to watch a flower bloom in slow motion and not try to pluck it and not try to crush it and not try to rush it. And it's hard for a lot of people. And so then what happens is that you can assess what reality is preferentially in your quantum auric field that is trying to attach to you. But before you actually have the full picture, you're going to have to use your intuition to discern if it is a good fit for you. And that's why mastering the energetics is also very important, because you need to be able to feel what lifeline is active. You need to be able to feel what realm you're entering into, because there are some pretty dark places out there. And all vibrations exist. And some people like the shadow vibrations. There are realms out there that have different levels and ratios of light to shadow. And I hate to speak in dualistic terms, but for the sake of transmitting ideas, it's important sometimes. There are places that are gritty. And there are upsides and downsides to being in a gritty world. The downside is that there's sickness. The upside is that there's passion, intensity, creativity, and drive. There are places that are more neutral. And everything's really clean. It even smells really nice. I always say it's like a really great place to raise your family. because it's really safe. You know, it just has a really safe feeling. There's not a lot of drama, there's not a lot of crime. There's just, you know, there's a lot of order, there's a lot of rules, there's a lot of oversight. There is a system, there is a matrix, but it's a place where you go to raise a family so you know that your kids are set up in life and they have a great education. And when they turn 18, they can decide to go somewhere else. But you know that they're going to have a certain feel in their childhood and it's going to be safe. They're not going to get into a lot of trouble. But unfortunately, in that place when I was traveling through, I felt disconnected from any sort of real emotion. Everything was neutralized. And as a result, I didn't feel any connection to creativity, originality, or desire to really produce. It was like a place where you figure out where you fit in versus a drive. Like a drive to produce, a drive to create usually comes from intense pain. And so the art there was like very corporate feeling. You know, it's just and the stores had this perfume that, you know, told you that what you were buying was going to be great quality and expensive, but you were going to be happy with it, but you weren't going to be too happy, because if you're too happy, then that also means that you have the contrast experience of being too sad. So you're a little bit happy and you're well fed and the food's good and you have a good job, but it's sort of like humdrum, you know? And so then you shift into a different version of Sedona is where I experienced this. And all of a sudden the street people change, you know, and they're like hooting and hollering, and you're back in a place that has grit, and you're back in a place that has homemade art and people, you know, selling their wares on the street. And it's like you have to feel out the vibration that you want and that is compatible with you. And there are other versions of Sedona that I don't want to get too off track. Because the important thing is that after you've allowed the reality to reveal itself and you have the ability to feel it, you don't want to go to a place that you're uncertain about, because there are consequences. There is the law of cause and effect, and there is a law of karma. And small actions, you know, like just driving down the street, not saying anything to anybody, barely being seen, barely being acknowledged, means that you can pass in and pass out without any real anchoring or tethering, right? But as soon as you start getting out of your car and shopping and talking to people, having lunch, the longer you spend there, the more actions you take there, the more you are imbuing yourself in those lifelines, and the more it's forming this attachment. This is my theory, at least. And then when you start building relationships there, when you start getting jobs, when you start opening bank accounts, then you're materializing and catalyzing many, many, many different anchor points. And so one of your strongest weapons is a weird way to say it. I don't know where that came from. One of your strongest positions is when you're in doubt, wait it out. Because there are some places that are not friendly, but you don't know it on the surface. Like everything looks fine. Everything, if you look on the news, it looks like everything's peaceful, right? And then you're in a country that has total oppression and violence that is being hidden from the public and hidden from the tourism brochures. Do they make those anymore? I don't know. But, you know, like even on social media sites, things get scrubbed So it's like, we're going to France. France looks like it's got a great. Wait a second. And you get there, and then all of a sudden you're in mass chaos and protest. So reality shifting can be like that too. It's like, hey, yeah, come and visit, come and visit. And then, especially if you're not attuned to energy and you're like, oh, we're going to India. You need to be very cognizant of what you are stepping into and what is unfolding. And there takes a certain level of wisdom, I find, and discernment to help you navigate some of those reality layers and not get stuck in them. And so if you have any doubt, wait it out. This became a mantra of mine. Now I apply it to almost all situations in my life. And I have to tell you, it's working out for me a lot better than before. And it just, this is really, really important. I have to tell you this, because what I have noticed is that with the shadow work journey in particular, we have this subconscious projection system in our minds, right? That is preferentially attracting and generating and maintaining realities. We're wired a certain way. We have archetypes based on our early experiences and how effed up we are from it, if at all. Hopefully not anymore. But this creates these repetitive patterns in life that we have to go through these different reality constructs that before we can advance, we have to solve, sort of like a puzzle. And if you don't solve it, then you just repeat it, like Russian Doll on Netflix. It's just endless, right? Or Groundhog Day. It's just repetitive. And the life may change, the people may change, the reality layer may change, the names may change, the organization may change, but the underlying pattern remains the same until you evolve your consciousness and then evolve your psychology to be able to examine yourself. And this is also part of quantum psychology, in my opinion. So as a result, just because you wake up one day and you're like, I'm going to go to India and I'm going to live a great life and I'm going to be abundant, and I'm going to be and you set out for that, and then you realize that you're just creating a web of repetitive nightmares or dysfunctional relationships or drawing toxic people to you, and you're like, what is going on? I'm reality shifting to hell. Great. All right, sign me up. Hey, you want to buy one of my courses? Yeah, no, okay. I just saw a TikTok the other night, and I don't watch a lot of content when I'm creating, but one popped up on my feed about reality shifting, and it was like, I was like, I'm not going to follow that protocol. I know where it leads me. But I think it's working for a lot of people, so I'm going to let them do it. Anyway, so at some point, you have to go through a clearing process because all of the reality layers that you've queued up for yourself until you've done that level of shadow work is just a recapitulation. So you have to wait longer than you think you're supposed to. And this is the lesson that I'm working through right now. And I've even gotten supporting messages in my dreams about this, that it's just going to take a beat longer than I personally think it should. And so reality creation, shifting, and recreation is really this very dense process that you have to clear your field if you're trying to leave certain patterns or certain nightmares, or like you have to clear the field. You have to clear the rainbow that is attached to you first. And that is a process in of itself. And then after you've gone through that process, you have to make sure that what preferentially attaches to you and where you're shifting into is actually an upgrade, right? Because the last thing you want to do is go and hit your lifelines just because to the first ship that comes into your dock, because that ship may be full of pirates. This is what I've learned. It's true. Like, you have to be very, very discerning. And so, as you are reality shifting, one of the strongest positions that you can take is actually no action and to let the realities reveal themselves to you. Because the more you catalyze something with your action, with your intent, with your words, with everything in alignment. I'm going to India. Oh God, I'm so glad I didn't do that. Like, once you catalyze everything, it fixes you in a lifeline. And then it's harder to stay mobile because, let's say in your quantum field, you have 5 slots of realities open to you at any given time. Right? I know we're multidimensional beings and some might advance to 9, but I want to say that if you're in human form from a binary society, you start with 1, maybe 2, alive or dead, and then maybe you awaken to 2 or 3, and then some of the most advanced people get up to like 4 or 5. Can you extend beyond that? Sure, but you better have some Adderall or something that helps your working memory, because you have to be able to hold all of those worlds in your mind. So the point is that now you have 5 attachments. And no, I'm not recommending that you take ADHD medicine if you're not diagnosed ADHD, because there's an inverted U function. So if you take too much and have too much dopamine, it has the opposite effect. And then it makes you a really unpersonable, unpleasant person to be around. So I don't recommend it unless your doctor prescribes it and unless you actually need it. So it's a joke, because there are limitations to the working memory functions. And to hold 5 worlds in your mind is a lot. And then to do 7 and 9, especially coming from a binary orientation where things are slow, like we talk slow, we think slow. I've been to other places where it's much faster and everything slows down. It's like the processing speed is just really annoyingly slow. It's like human communications run on dial-up. I happen to like that for my pace of meditation lectures, because I like to talk to people who are doing a lot of processing as they're listening and not having, like empty heads. Like, I like talking to people who are thinking as we go along, integrating and synthesizing. But when you travel to other places, the speed for the communication and even what you can process intellectually is greatly, greatly enhanced. So it's like you come back down to these dimensions. You're like, oh, yes, time to relax. Yes, let's just take a nap. Yes. It's just like, it's very different. So holding that many worlds in your mind when you're coming from a binary cognition and a binary society is really, really challenging. So as a result, you have a limited number of worlds or slots, RAM slots, if you will, that are trying to attach to you. And if you fill all of them because you're like, oh, cool, first reality shift that I see, if you fill all of them without doing the shadow work, then you're just going to fill them up with the same. And what this means is that when your manifestation and your reality of your dreams is trying to get to you, your orbit is full and blocked. And that's why one of your biggest positions is, when in doubt, wait it out. Let it reveal itself to you. Be discerning, be picky, be very, not too picky, because there is pathology with that as well, but But like really take it in before making any decisions. Really assess. Really see it from a couple of different angles and viewpoints. Really map it out. And then gently and slowly start communicating with it, acting in that reality layer, anchoring yourself in, shopping a little bit, but not too much, and maybe opening a remote business there, see what it feels like to live there before you buy a house, that sort of thing. And then you can be sure that the endeavors that you're embarking on are going to lead you to the future of your dreams. So, if you are interested in working one on one, I am a reality shifting coach. If you don't know, I would love to potentially work with you. Feel free to email me a little bit about your case, your situation, your dreams, your goals, your desired reality that you want to come into fruition. And let's see if we can't shift you to that. No promises. This is all experimental techniques, but you can email me at sacredjourneyproductions@gmail.com. Okay, we'll talk soon.